Hello and welcome to today's webinar, The Year Ahead, Insights into the 2026 R&E Landscape from the InCommon Catalysts. This is our mostly monthly webinar focusing on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Program Manager for Cohorts and Accelerators at the InCommon Academy, and I'll be your host for today. Just a few reminders about today's program. James, if you want to advance one more. As always, we'll be taking questions and comments live during the Zoom Q&A function. So please send us your questions during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session after all of our catalysts have had a chance to speak. We'll also encourage you to post messages in the chat. I see you're all doing that now. Please continue that. It's here for group discussion. Just be sure, again, when you are posting, your message is being sent to everyone in that dropdown. And just a final reminder that this event is being recorded. If you registered for this IAM online, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And then we'll also post these materials to the InCommon website and the IAM online YouTube channel in the coming days. So watch your inbox for those links. And now we are excited to begin today's webinar, The Year Ahead, Insights into the 2026 R&E IAM Landscape with the InCommon Catalysts, and to hear from our colleagues with our InCommon Catalyst partners as they share their insights into the challenges and opportunities that face the identity and access management community in the year ahead. So to kick things off, I'm excited to turn things over to our moderator for today, Industry Relationship Manager at Internet2, James Crampton.
Thank you, Jody, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. We're here today with three of our Catalyst partners. Now, InCommon Catalysts are trusted partners in identity and access management in research and education. So we're going to start out today hearing tales from the C-suite from Paul Spouty of Unicon. And after that, Peter Belcherak from Evolvium will be describing the year's evolutions in AI integrations into IAM products. And then finally, Jeff Pruzzi and Mary McKee from Cirrus Identity will be rounding out our lineup today. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul.
Hi, welcome, and thank you for having me here. I'm Paul Spouty from Unicon, software architect in identity access management. Been with Unicon over 13 years now. And Unicon really likes to partner with you and get your goals done in identity access management and across the learner landscape. So thank you for having me. Next slide, please. So Unicon deals a lot with sales, C-suite, talking with them, RFPs, things like that. And these are kind of insights from the last few years. And it's been a change. If you've attended TechX 2024, 2025, you kind of see some of these themes. But also just from the integration working groups, other groups, you see there's been a lot of change lately in the identity and access management landscape. First and foremost, obviously, right now is budget uncertainty. And we hear that from everyone. I don't know what my budget's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be cut. We're just bracing for cuts. And a lot of it has to do with student enrollment dropping, but there's many other factors into that. Along with that, you have some changes in FAFSA, other things, and so there's going to be some larger tracking of ghost learners and things like that. There is an exception to those budgets, though, recently is the AI. You probably all heard of artificial intelligence and the hype around that. So there are some funding and budgets around that. So if you can kind of relate your IAM initiatives to AI, unfortunately, in some way, you can get some funding. And there's been a long drain of expertise. This is the past 10 years in higher ed, but folks are retiring. The folks that were there 30, 20 years ago are retiring, other churn and other causes. So we see that teams are getting smaller, unfortunately, and that's not where you want to be here in 2026 as identity and security is expanding and threats are evolving and all that sort of thing. So it's definitely a big risk of the expertise turnover and maintaining your institutional knowledge. So the biggest takeaway that I can give you, and we'll have a takeaway slide here, but is wrapping up IAM, keeping in your C-level loop and keeping even above that, that IAM is important. It touches every learner, every even parent if they log in through SSO, researchers, all the stuff at your university. IAM underpins it all, really, at this point in 2026. And so you need to really surface that and surface the risks and the gaps and the problems that you're having in that practice, because it does affect everything else. Next slide, please. And then there's compliance. So compliance is pushing a lot of different things. The largest in the United States or North America is cyber insurance. And that's pushed us into MFA pretty much for everyone, and also getting rid of possibly now SMS and voice options. And so we see a shift to passwordless authentication. Passwordless is either using a hardware key or using an app, probably is the most common. And that is basically you don't have a password to type in, you just use the app like an MFA only. There's a lot of things around that with help desk support and accessibility, but generally it's no longer experimental. It's kind of a lot of folks are looking to adopt a passwordless solution. With that, we see a little trend, and I'll state a little bit later, but of folks leaving Duo due to cost increases and other things, and looking at things like Microsoft Authenticator for this passwordless. But there's others out there, many others out there. As I mentioned, identity is expanding in its scope. So not only do we have just SSO and MFA, those were the things like 10 years ago. Of course, we have the identity management itself, access. We have privileged access management integrations, and we have even more than that, non-machine identities. So identity is just always expanding. Obviously, we're trying to get to some sort of nirvana where we can connect to every system and know who has access what, when, and where. But that's always ongoing. So just IAM's not going away. It's defined in NIST. It should be a core practice at your institution, which it already usually is, and it's not going away. It's only getting bigger. Of course, part of that is automation, and we see a lot of C-levels lately from the corporate world in higher ed. For whatever reason, I'm not sure, but just note that you might have to talk some of the corporate language to bend their ear or to make them happy, right? And so they want to see more top-down stuff. Maybe your university doesn't work like that. That's fine, but maybe you can give them more reporting or better reporting on your initiatives. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more too. You want to use NIST or perhaps zero trust terminology with them, because they're talking about risks. They're talking about mitigating risks. They're talking about satisfying ISO, cyber insurance, and all these other compliance things. And if you can speak that language, that can help with the IAM funding and also just where you're at with IAM. We all know we need to upgrade our stuff, probably 30 years old. But if you can explain it in the terms of some of these new initiatives, that would usually go a long way. And UniCon has helped a lot of folks do that. Next slide, please. So architectural trends. Again, passwordless and MFA advancement as we go through, and SSO changes. Identity verification and orchestration. So combating those ghost learners. Also, you might have learners that never step foot on your campus any longer. So you have to verify those folks to a reasonable level. And so that's kind of new things that are spinning up and to look at. At TechX 2024, Grady Bailey demonstrated a verification, pretty neat, but it's an app and it verifies your face and your government credentials and all of that. There might be background checks and things that it can do as well that the service does as part of that. There's digital wallets. Probably you've heard of the Apple and some of the others out there. A lot of vendors are starting to include them in their products. A lot of them can seem one-off or not compatible with each other. But we're going to look for this in the future. It's been talked about at TechX and other Internet 2 forums and InCommon forums. And so this is going to be increasing, and we'll see what comes about. If you've been following Europe, they've instituted that for some government IDs. Of course, artificial intelligence in IAM is a big deal. The black hats or the bad actors are using it, right? It's out there, and it's going to get used for phishing attempts against your help desk. Already probably is. It's going to get used for running scripts and other things against your systems, as it already is. So we're going to be looking at how can we adopt AI in a safe, sustainable manner, keeping the humans in the loop, though, right? And so that we can gain efficiency, right? Reduce workload, and reduce threats and things like that. Really, in the data landscape and the identity landscape, we've kind of had AI already before it was named as such, and so it's just going to increase. And you may feel left behind by the AI hype and all the Claude codes and all the things out there. that's okay too. I'll talk about it. You want to grow cautiously into the arena, and really look at the threat landscape when you employ these things. And then zero trust maturity. Again, CISA has identified the pillars of that. I think in higher ed, we're never going to get there fully because just the demands on it, you can't, guarantee every student laptop or student brought device. But the thing is that C-level's thinking about those things, right? And so we got to be looking out ahead and adopting those pillars as best we can. And identity does underpin, if you look at it, on nearly every pillar there. Next slide, please. So the takeaways or recommendations for 2026 are we're in a big state of change. Some have likened the AI era to the early .com 2000s era or the internet era. I'm not sure. I can't talk to that, but I can talk to you. IAM is in a big state of change compared to 5, 10 years ago. And some might say, oh, it's always been changing. Sure. But we have things like pastoralists coming down the pike. We have things like the privileged access management. And all these things I talked about are really shaking things up and, again, expanding of the IAM role. So really prioritize IAM as your security foundation. Really learn what your C-level and hires are looking for and get good visuals for them about where you're at, what you need. Be vocal about losing talent. You don't have talent. I've heard from even guys on the ground, IAM folks on the ground, that I don't know if I'm going to have my job yesterday. Well, that's bad because if IAM does not have a person at your institution, how are you going to do SSO? How are you going to keep these things running? And I don't think some of the higher ups are aware of that possibility, right? So we have to make them aware of this thing. So addressing that knowledge debt, there's a lot of ways to do that. Document what you have, document what you're implementing, document what you're doing, and then also you can work with partners like the Catalyst partners and others that can help you do evals, can help you do managed services, or even backfill in workers that are lost. And the with AI, you just want to be cautious and all the new technology about deploying it. So experiment, sure, great, but move cautiously about actually deploying because we have limited budget, we have limited manpower, as I discussed, and so making missteps such as data breaches or implementing a tool that doesn't fully meet your needs and maybe even be a step back in some respects from what you had can really hurt. Really hurt, and then you cannot dig out of it. So be cautious about implementing new technology, be purposeful, and really plan out your deployments. And we can help with that. Others can help with that. But plan out your deployments and basically get what you have today, get what you want out of that tool, write it all down so that when you deploy it, you can get some lessons learned and some next steps. So that's my talk. I know it was fast, but if you want to continue the conversation, put in the chat. What's your biggest challenge from 2026? What biggest technology in IAM are you looking at adopting? Maybe I didn't cover it here today. And of course, there's the internet to working groups and Slack channels, which are free to join. So those things, we'll continue the conversation, and UConn's always open to conversing about these things. But hopefully you found it useful, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul. And I will mention to people, if you do have Q&A, there's a button for that. So check your Zoom bar. You may need to look under the more dots to find the Q&A button, but we have a whole Q&A forum that I will be monitoring, and we will have a round of Q&A with our panelists at the end today. So now we're going to move on to Peter Balchak from Evolvium, talking about built-in artificial intelligence in IAM systems.
Thank you, James. It's Peter, working as identity engineer at Evolvium, and also with a background of working at IAM solutions or AI solution for academia for over 10 years. So with that, I'll be talking about the current use of AI in the identity and access management, then present some of the increasing trends we see in the area, and I will wrap up with our concerns regarding AI, how we at Evolvium address them, and what are our current results. So let's start with the current more mainstream use of AI in the IAM. Right now, it is more focused on the access management side, whether it is evaluating risk during login, detecting anomalies from the logs, or enhancing the identity proofing process. We may work with AI even without actually knowing about it. For sure, the number of use cases that are covered by AI in the access management is increasing every day. However, what we can see is also the increased demand on the identity management side as well. The first point, data analysis and smart suggestions, is based on the centralized nature of the IAM or IGA systems. They possess lots of data that can be analyzed, and based on the analysis, AI can suggest smart adjustments. For example, role mining, where AI can perform analysis of roles present in your institution and provide suggestions how to structure them more effectively. But what I want to focus on more is the second point, where we see the increased demand for AI application, and that is to remove or at least simplify tedious tasks. For sure, all of us have used at least once a chatbot to help us with something, whether it is about polishing text or providing a script we need to implement. It helps us to be more productive in our work. In the IAM sector, the growing need to use AI is driven mainly by the complexity of the deployments, where we need to manage thousands of identities interconnected with increasing number of applications. And moreover, as organizations, it was mentioned by Paul, as organizations encounter budget constraints, staff shortage, identity engineers need to reach out for any help there is in order to keep up with high demands. Next slide, please. One of the main ongoing challenges we see in the identity management is the application onboarding. For each new application we want to bring to our ecosystem, we need to develop custom integration code, so-called connector. The integration, even though not so difficult, is time-consuming manual effort. Also, implementing a new identity connector does not bring business value by itself, but still it is something that needs to be done before we can set up complex policies that actually enable access to users. That's why we see a growing demand for smarter, more efficient, and more scalable approaches. And fortunately, thanks for the latest progress in AI, we can automate some of the complex tasks and focus on things that really matters and that require our expertise as identity engineers. So it is not a surprise we already seen an increasing number of people who are beginning to leverage AI during the connectors implementation. They're actually usually using third-party LLMs for implementation of the main connector logic, for writing tests to get more reliable results, and to help them with the follow-up configuration, for example. We note that by using this approach, they are able to significantly reduce the time needed to integrate new applications, and there are more and more people who are jumping on that train. Next slide, please, and one more. Yeah. Still, even though using the third-party LLMs to implement connectors may bring great results, we need to be aware of potential downsides while using it. The first one is, of course, security. Each time we use AI or we may use AI to implement a new connector, we need to make sure the communication between the central IGA or IAM system and the target application is performed securely. So we know the authentication is done correctly, whether it is like token-based authentication or something else. So we need to understand the code and test it properly. And we need to spend great amount of time to do so. Also, the second part is maintainability. Each time we want to extend the connector capabilities or just change the existing ones, we need to either do it manually or use AI again and hope it does not break the already working code. So again, the further detailed review and testing is crucial. At Evolvium, we have decided to embrace the demand and to target mainly the difficulties with the application onboarding. but we wanted to solve it in more reliable way so we can be sure our solution is secure and easier to maintain than by using the third-party LLMs. So therefore, we have developed a low-code connector development framework, which provides a foundation for connector implementation. Basically, for each type of connector, currently it is REST, Scheme, and DB connectors. The framework provides essential functionality that is common for all applications in that category and allow us to focus on the parts that are different for each system, like different API calls and so on. It provides a declarative approach to writing connectors. And on top of that, we are working on the connector generator service that is able to search and scrape the documentation and generate the final connector for us. Also, one of the other things we are working on is a service for provisioning configuration automation. And it uses the same strategy as the previous one, as the connector implementation. The foundation and the framework here is represented by Midpoint itself, and the service just generates mapping rules, correlation rules, and so on. So it works on something we trust and something we can rely on, and it provides a service on top of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you have probably already guessed, all of this and even more is coming to Midpoint soon. We truly hope it will help the community, and that's also why we are following its open source mindset as much as possible. To make sure nothing is done by AI without you knowing about it, the verification and execution is still done by human. The AI service offers only suggestions. This also means that the AI is active only during the implementation and the configuration phase. It does not interfere in any other way later on. Also, while we plan to offer the AI assistant as a service, you will have also option to run it on your own using a local engine, local LLMs. Moreover, everything can be run even without the AI. At each step, you can choose whether you want to use AI or not. If not, services can provide at least suggestions based on smart algorithms that we have implemented, because some of them could be provided even without using the AI. Another thing to mention is that everything we do is, of course, open source, and therefore you can find it in our GitHub repository. And the last thing, it will be production ready in Q4 this year. And if you are interested in more details, you can use the provided link below. With that, that's all from my side, and I pass the board to the next speaker. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. So next up, we're going to hear from Jeff Rapuzzi and Mary McKee from Cirrus Identity. And they are talking with us today about person-centered governance.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here for this lunchtime chat. My name is Jeff Rapuzzi. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development at Cirrus Identity, and I'm joined by our Chief Product and Strategy Officer, Mary McKee. Today, we want to talk about person-centered governance in research and education, and not necessarily as a feature set, but as a structural question. In theory, like governance sounds simple, right? Like everyone agrees there's one source of truth, like one model, one hierarchy. But in practice, this is a little bit different, right? Authority is distributed, roles overlap, systems don't collapse neatly. And when tools require like consensus that doesn't exist, implementation then becomes painful, right? So instead of forcing agreement, what if governance worked with distributed authority instead of against it? And so when we talk about workforce identity, we're assuming linear life cycles here, right? We're a joiner, a mover, a leaver. That's traditional workforce. But in R&E, we know that these life cycles are non-linear, right? Roles overlap a lot of times. Access at times is long-lived and also unpredictable. I'm sure we've all seen examples of a person who is an employee and then is an alum. Hopefully, maybe they also become a donor, then also a research collaborator. Sometimes this can all happen at once. And this part isn't necessarily a recent shift. We've seen this in R&E for a long time. It's how R&E has always sort of worked. But we sort of just kept applying, what I would call our like workforce duct tape logic to it, right? Like how can we fix it and make things work? So can you go to the next slide, please? And so when governance feels fragmented, we often assume something is wrong. There's dysfunction, right? In R&E, fragmentation often reflects distributed authority. And by their very nature, institutions become federated. By that, I mean, HR has their authority. The alumni office has their own authority. The research administration has their own authority. And so this fragmentation isn't necessarily failure by any means. It's just the expression of multiple legitimate domains that are all occupying in the same space. Next slide, please. So, what does person-centered governance actually mean in this context? What it means is one durable person, right? Credentials are secondary, context lives in attributes, and authority is then distributed but not centralized. More importantly, this coherence requires a common user record. So without a shared identity layer, the user experience fractures almost immediately. Multiple records sort of snowball into becoming multiple accounts. And that really becomes something that is not negotiable. Next slide, please. So if we think about person-centered governance in R&E, it really only works if authority remains contextual, right? Many tools require different types of institutional consensus. We think about collapsing identity in order to collapse governance. And then we sort of lead to this assumption, right, of one source of truth, one authority model, one governance hierarchy. But collapsing identity to simplify governance doesn't necessarily reflect how we're seeing operations in R&E. We don't require everyone to agree, right? We don't feel like we should require everyone to agree in order to govern responsibly within serious identity. Next slide, please. So at some point, right, we have to acknowledge that the simple statement that you cannot govern a human being. You can only govern context, right? A person can be an employee, an alum, a donor, a lifelong learner, a booster. Those roles all overlap. They don't collapse into a single narrative. And so when we think about governance and its respect to that context, we need to think about it without fragmenting identity. So next slide, please. So what are we actually doing about all of this, right? Um, the answer sort of lives in these three core ideas. So first, one identity gives you coherence. A common user record isn't negotiable, right? Without it, the user experience fragments immediately. People are juggling multiple accounts, multiple credentials, multiple login paths. Coherence means one durable person record, even as their role evolves over time. That's what keeps the experience in all of us sane, right? Second, many authorities give you contextual governance. So let HR govern HR, let alumni govern alumni, let the research administration govern research access. We don't collapse those into a single authority hierarchy just to make the tooling cleaner. Context matters. And again, in R&E, authority is legitimately distributed. And third, loose coupling ensures that systems don't collapse into one hierarchy. So loose coupling means the identity layer provides this coherence while authority domains remain intact. We are not forcing every system of record to agree on a single governance narrative. We are connecting them in a way to, preserve their boundaries. So the pattern is essentially simple, right? Coherence at the identity layer, context at the governance layer, and then loose coupling between systems. This is how we avoid forced reconciliation while still maintaining a clean user experience. Next slide, please. So this is what coherence looks like in practice. There is one durable identity record, right? One UID, but multiple systems of record remain intact, right? We have SIS, we have alumni, we have others in there, but they're loosely coupled to this shared identity layer. If this person has separate records for each system, they'd have separate accounts, separate credentials, leading to that fragmented experience. And coherence is what keeps that from happening within this model. Next slide, please. And this is sort of where authority lives, right? This is our contextual governance. Authority is clearly scoped. Attributes and permissions live where the authority lives. We're not collapsing financial aid and housing and grades into one institutional, decision engine. Each authority domain gets to govern its own context. The identity remains unified and authority remains distributed within this model. Next slide, please. So when it comes to loose coupling, institutions are structurally different, right? Some have centralized ERP systems, others have separate, as I mentioned, HR, student, and alumni systems, often for good reason. We support both of those, right? What we do is adapt to the authority model here instead of collapsing it. And so loose coupling gives this coherence without this forced uniformity. That is person-centered governance in practice. It's how we think about governing context without forcing any sort of consensus. And so we will pause here for our presentation. And as we move into the Q&A portion of this, I think we're really interested in just, hearing about where does authority live at your institution, and does your identity architecture reflect that reality? Or I think more simply put, maybe in more provocative sense, are you governing people or are you governing context?
Yeah, I think that's the end. I think I'm joining to make sure we've shown some screenshots here that are new offerings in the community. We've got some community members who are using these tools right now, but I wanted to make sure to be here. I think Jeff covered the slides, but happy to help with the Q&A if there's any questions about how we're helping that. But that, in summary, that is what we're thinking about for 2026 is, as AI is definitely complicating things, we haven't nailed it at figuring out governance as a community for these kinds of intersections that Jeff spoke to. So, making sure that we have good solutions that allow people to flex as business is changing very rapidly for all of us is really what we're focused on at Cirrus Identity.
Thank you. Well, I mean, one thing that immediately comes to mind from me, Mary, is, Jeff just showed us some screenshots and some architecture diagrams of the tooling capabilities that Cirrus has developed. But tooling, of course, offers some capabilities to the business side, right? So
Yeah.
how do you then, what are kind of best practices for how you talk with the different stakeholders across the university that have their own domains that contribute to the overall context?
Yeah, that's a great question, James. I think from our perspective, sometimes we are going after the wrong objective because we're making a false equivalency between the very real reality that if you want a good user experience in a place as intersectional as a university or a research organization, you need to have you don't want someone having 8 different accounts to log in. You don't want someone to have a million different credentials to log in. You need to have some centralized notion because, I think all of us who have worked at universities, which I think is most of us on the call, if not currently working at a university, knows that somebody will call, an alum will call your alumni office, and they expect that the alumni office represents all identity across the entire larger enterprise, right? And that's just not what things are. So you absolutely need to have a consistent user experience with a portable identity. But where I think we draw the false equivalency is that every single area needs to agree on attributes. And so what we're trying to do is create a sandbox that everyone can play in without having to give up things that individual business functions can't afford to give up. So the tooling is really about, I think, James, speaking to a stakeholder. If I say, hey, in order to bring you into the shared system, you are going to have to lose visibility, lose control, lose ability to manage your own attributes, adapt your use case to our use case. In some cases, there are really practical reasons why you can't do that. And then what we end up doing as a community is passing along the cost of that real and non-negotiable complexity to the end user. So really what we're trying to focus on is how do we make sure that people can function within the same universe so that we all have the same goal of making sure that your user base does not have to have multiple accounts. It feels seamless transitioning here and there, but that at the individual context level, people are able to have the amount of flexibility that is what results in shadow IT. It's what results in people saying, I'm not buying into the shared system. I'm going to go create my own guest system.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great explanation. I think one of the themes that we've seen across the different speakers today has been this evolving themes, right, between different contexts. We heard a lot from Cirrus on that, but we also saw threads of that in from Evolvium as well, and really from the C-suite, understanding the perspectives of the C-level leadership at a university or an organization. Those have they're valuable ways to put IAM in their context, in the right context for those leaders to understand and relate to. Paul, I saw that you answered in chat a question from Chris regarding the relative market share of Duo versus Microsoft and other MFA. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's hard to answer with certainty. Every institution has their own reasons for adopting technology, and one of the things with Microsoft and Entra is you probably already have it today, right? And so they have that big in with most institutions. Another thing is that Microsoft Authenticator app, generally, if you're using other Microsoft Entra integrations and things like Intune, works really well with all of that. And so folks kind of believe the cost increases with Duo. Also, the cyber insurance, pushing kind of towards passwordless in a way. Those things kind of drove people or driving people to Microsoft Authenticator, at least at the current instance. And my current pulse is, and again, don't take this away as gospel because Duo is adding stuff every day, right? But is that Microsoft Authenticator is probably the most seamless featured app out there. Okta has limitations, and the Duo app has limitations. And certainly for certain ramp initiatives, Duo has some restrictions on it. But that's changing, right? They're getting better, and so they'll all be competing and battling it out in the future. And certainly, we got to see what open source brings. If passwordless and an app is the answer, then hopefully, I have hopes that open source can produce something that might work for folks out there as well. But that all remains to be seen. But those are the reasons that I see: cost and perceived better integrations with the app.
With that, I think we've largely wrapped up. If there are any other questions, feel free to throw them into Q&A. But I think I'm going to turn it back over to Jody for just some closing thoughts.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and for joining us for this conversation.